Anthropic makes bank. Net neutrality ain't so neutral. IBM ends their little IP tiff. FCC powers low powered devices. HashiCorp deal draws UK eyes. Ingram Micro parts ways with Broadcom. And we're going to take a closer look at some of the big stories coming out of CES in the first rundown episode of 2025. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown. Today is January the 8th, 2025. We are back, rested, and refreshed from all of the holiday revelry, and it's a good thing because it is National Trivia Day. Of course, you know it is because that's basically what we do here when we open up the rundown. It's also National Fruitcake Day. And if you still have one of those things, why? Because they should really be out of your house by New Year's, otherwise, they're bad luck. But thankfully, I have somebody who knows exactly how to deal with all of those holiday traditions and the hangover that comes along with them in the new year. Mr. Stephen Foskett joining me on the Rundown this week. Stephen, welcome to the Rundown for 2025.
It is nice to be back for the Rundown. I got to say, I missed covering the news, and unfortunately, some of our stories went stale and then got moldy, and then we had to throw them out, just like all those Christmas leftovers. It's also National Spaghetti Day, and you do not want to eat stale, moldy spaghetti.
No, you don't. You need something fresh and exciting and wonderful. And thankfully, we have news stories that'll hit the spot perfectly. We're going to go ahead and kick off with probably one of the biggest stories, at least by dollar value, and that would be our friends over at the European AI powerhouse Anthropic, because they're seeking $2 billion in funding at a valuation of $60 billion. This reflects the growing excitement and investment in all things AI, particularly generative AI. And there have been some significant losses at many startups, which Anthropic is hoping to kind of sweep under the rug a little bit. Now, you may recall that Anthropic was founded by former OpenAI employees. It focuses on safely testing and has seen substantial growth in revenue, primarily from business sales, which seems to be a switch from where AI is being positioned with a lot of consumers. Stephen, do you think Anthropic is going to get what they're looking for in this funding round?
Yes, I think they're going to get lots of money. Anthropic is doing a lot of things right. I know that it's it's fashionable to criticize companies like OpenAI, and frankly, I don't blame you. But Anthropic is actually an interesting case. As I talked about yesterday on TechStrong Gang, Anthropic being based in Europe and being subject to European data privacy laws and stricter controls by the government and a more consistent government, if you can believe that, Europeans. Anyway, it is actually in I think, a better place than many of these AI model companies that they're going up against. This funding round would make Anthropic the fifth most valuable startup in the world after some notable names, including OpenAI and SpaceX and Stripe and Databricks. And why is that? Well, the answer is because Anthropic is basically OpenAI, but I don't know, a little less troublesome. They have put together some incredible models. The Claude model that they have, the latest Claude, is right up there with anything that OpenAI has. And it's also in a much better position with regard to copyright. Now, by all accounts, Anthropic, just like OpenAI, did in fact use copyrighted materials when developing their models. But Anthropic has been restrained by the courts and by popular governmental controls from doing that quite as much. They've also been restrained by a record industry lawsuit that has perhaps informed their culture on things of copyright, respecting copyright, and so on. And as I talked about yesterday on TechStrong Gang, one of the interesting aspects of that is I'm hearing that they are increasingly turning to synthetic data to train their newest models. Now, that's for a couple of reasons. One is because they just plain ran out of data. Every AI company is hungry for data and basically running out of it. The second reason is the controls on copyright and restrictions on using data. The third element is that now they already have systems, the older versions of Claude, that can produce really high quality truthy sounding data that they can train their new models on. What I posited there and what I will posit here is just like in the 80s when companies were able to make a clean room alternative to the IBM PC BIOS. I think that companies like Anthropic are going to make clean room AI models based on entirely synthetic data. And that will enable them to sidestep much of the copyright issues that have been brought up. Now, it doesn't sidestep all the rest of the issues, but I should also point out that the technology has been improving so much that some of the burn down the rainforest aspects of AI model training have also kind of gone by the wayside. If you're still thinking that, that's so 2024. In 2025, I think what we're going to be seeing is a lot more focus on safe and energy efficient, if you can believe it, AI models from companies like Anthropic. So overall, as you can hear, I'm a little bit positive on this company. And in fact, I am switching a lot of my stuff over to Claude because it does such a nice job and because, frankly, OpenAI doesn't. So it's nice to see. Tom, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals here in the US has ruled that the FCC rules on net neutrality are unconstitutional based on the overturning of Chevron deference in Loper in 2024. Per the ruling, the judges believe that the FCC did not have the legal authority to reinstitute the rules, which were first put in place in 2015 but repealed in 2017. The judicial ruling and reasoning is based, as I said, on Loper, which suggests that only Congress can pass laws to regulate businesses. And that is, in fact, what it seems like the Supreme Court here is saying, too. What's your take on the overturning of net neutrality?
I'm trying to be neutral. I'm going to tell you a real quick story. I used to work with somebody that would have his secretary print out his emails so that he could read them and dictate a response back to her, who would then send that email from his account on his behalf as if he was sending the email. The reason why he did this is because he didn't understand how email worked. That story is not apropos of anything except for the fact that the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals now believes that, oh, I don't know, several geriatric senior citizens who got elected to office believe that they know better about how the internet works than literal experts in the field who deal with the internet all day long. With the possible exception of my new bestie, Ron Wyden, pretty sure that nobody in Congress has any clue about how technology works as long as it's anything other than their phone. For those of you out there that don't understand why I've always been such a bulwark on why net neutrality is important, another story. Literally this morning, I was downloading a file to have something I wanted to 3D print it, and I got a pop-up, and it said, your download will start in 30 seconds because we have to show you this ad in order to be able to pay for our hosting. But if you click here and you join our site, you can download things immediately. Now, most people would probably sit there and think, oh, I'll wait 30 seconds and watch the ad because I don't want to pay for this. Imagine if that's literally everything that pops up in your system every time you try to access a site. And it's not the site doing it, it's your ISP. Oh, would you like to be able to see this at full speed or in gigablast or ultra boost or whatever the crap they're calling it this week? Well, click here to upgrade every time, because that is one of the things that they would be allowed to do without net neutrality. Could you imagine if your phone provider treated your home phone like a payphone? Sorry, kids. If you're under the age of 35, you may not remember that there was a time when you called a phone, you had to put coins into it. Coins are metal money. And then those coins, if you were running out of time, it would be like, please deposit 25 cents for additional minutes. And you had to do that, right? Yeah, phone calls used to not be free. Do you want to go back to that? I don't. It's one of the reasons why I'm a huge proponent of net neutrality and not so much a proponent of the Sixth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, because they don't know what they're doing. Why wasn't this filed in California where Silicon Valley exists? I'll let you research that on your own, but I think you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. And I don't want to stand on a political soapbox any more than I have to. Let's just say I hope that this decision gets revisited soon, with a better outcome for those of us who have to use the internet on a daily basis. IBM and GlobalFoundries rang in the new year with an agreement to drop the suits that each had filed against each other. The suits came about because way back in 2015, IBM sold their foundry technology to GlobalFoundries. No big deal. But in 2021, IBM filed their first lawsuit alleging breach of contract in chip manufacturing. GlobalFoundries turned right around and filed a countersuit alleging that IBM stole intellectual property and trade secrets from the company and then shared them with Intel and a Japanese firm named Rapidus. The announcement was pretty terse and did not disclose any of the settlement details and hinted at potential future engagements between the companies. Stephen, is this them burying the hatchet, or is this them just agreeing that they're not going to get any money out of this compared to working together in the future?
I think this is basically all about accepting reality. So, as you mentioned, I think that we need a little bit of background here. So, who is Global Foundries? Global Foundries was AMD's fab operation. Now, if you listened into the rundown, basically any episode in 2024, you heard me talking a lot about Intel and their chip making operations and the fact that they have chip design and chip manufacturing and they're trying to improve manufacturing. And that was Pat Gelsinger's big thing, that they would be competitive with TSMC. Well, that is what's happening at Intel, but AMD already reached that agreement and that point a long time ago. Actually, over 15 years ago, AMD decided that they didn't want to have a manufacturing operation. They wanted to be what's called fabless. They wanted to have a chip design operation, and then they would basically have other companies build those chips for them. So they spun off all of their chip manufacturing into a company called GlobalFoundries. And GlobalFoundries became a pretty competitive chip making operation over the 2010s, and then wasn't as competitive after that. So what happened is IBM also reached this conclusion shortly after AMD and decided that they wanted to spin off their fabs in Essex Junction, Vermont, and East Fishkill, New York. But they couldn't find anybody who wanted to buy them. And so ultimately, IBM gave $1.5 billion to GlobalFoundries to take the fab operation. In exchange, GlobalFoundries agreed to provide IBM with leading edge manufacturing services for the foreseeable future. And IBM gave them access to a lot of their intellectual property in addition to the buildings and chip fabs and so on. But as I said a minute ago, GlobalFoundries hasn't actually kept up with the rapid advancements in chip manufacturing from companies like Intel, TSMC, Samsung, and many others. And in fact, they were unable to compete even in the 7 nanometer space and kind of backed away from that. This put IBM in kind of a bind because IBM essentially had paid them to be able to manufacture something that they could not manufacture. And so a few years back, GlobalFoundries sued IBM, IBM sued GlobalFoundries, and the whole thing became a giant mess. Well, this settlement, I guess, is basically an accepting of reality that GlobalFoundries is not going to be a leading edge chip manufacturer that's going to be able to build, sub 10 nanometer chips for IBM's Watson and AI and that sort of thing, as well as their mainframes, I should mention. That was another big aspect of this. And in fact, GlobalFoundries is going to kind of find its own place in the global chip manufacturing pantheon that doesn't involve being on the leading edge. IBM has, I guess, accepted reality that GlobalFoundries isn't going to be able to do what they need it to do. And so they're going to move forward and probably use companies like TSMC and others to manufacture their chips going forward. So as I said, once you're in a lawsuit, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But once you finally reach the end of it, a lot of those things just sort of go by the wayside. So I expect this to be the beginning of the end of that little battle, and also kind of a telling moment in the history of technology with regard to fabless companies and chip fabs and that sort of thing, which is going to be a topic I suspect we're going to be talking about a lot in 2025 as well. Back on December 12th, the FCC announced that they'll be opening the remaining 350 megahertz of frequency in the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band spectrum for use by low power devices. This ruling means that these low power devices can now operate across the whole spectrum without a license. The primary use case is devices that need high connection speeds but at close range, such as medical monitors or in car devices. And these devices may only operate indoors per the current specs for the 6 gigahertz band and must listen on the channel before broadcasting to ensure that the channel is clear. Tom, we've been hearing a lot about Wi Fi 7 and 6 gigahertz. Is that relevant here, or is this really a different kind of spectrum?
There is relevance, and it's a little different, but for other reasons. So if you think of the spectrum, it's a big block, right? It's about 1200 megahertz worth of channel bandwidth. So that's a 12-lane highway. Well, what essentially had happened was the FCC had told these lower power devices, you can only drive on the 8 lanes on the right, the higher bandwidth, which is fine. But what about those other lanes over there? Like, why can't we use those? Well, we haven't figured out what's in those lanes yet. We don't want you to have any problems. You probably could operate down there, wouldn't be any issues. The problem is that the three grandmas that drive in that lane also are super rich and convince the FCC to have everybody stay out of their lane for a little while, even though they only go to the store on Sundays and they have no need to ever actually use it very much. Those grandmothers, by the way, are satellite downlink companies. There's been a lot of research that has been done by a lot of people in the industry, including folks like Chuck Lukaszewski, formerly of Aruba HPE, who basically said there's no way we will ever cause interference with all of these things. But yet, of course, the incumbents in the space hate the fact that their space got taken over. I digress. What happened in this ruling last month was that the FCC said, yeah, you're not going to cause any problems, provided you follow the same rules that we have put in place for Wi-Fi 7. For those of you who don't know, Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7 are only validated for indoor power usage right now. So basically, it can't really kind of spread outside of your house. And what it does is it has to communicate with a database called the Automated Frequency Coordination Database, or AFC. And it listens in the area to find out if there's anybody broadcasting on that frequency. And if it does hear somebody, then it picks a different one. But if not, it registers with AFC and says, I'm using this frequency at this time. And so then we basically can get like automated like channel planning and all that other stuff, which is great for Wi-Fi because all the major Wi-Fi manufacturers support AFC really well, and they have all these other stuff. It's the other ones that, the satellite downlinks and the ships coming into port who basically like blast the whole spectrum. Now, this is specifically aimed at low power devices, so even lower power than your average Wi-Fi. Like you said in the intro, Stephen, this is like insulin pumps. This is the in-car Wi-Fi, right? So this is the stereo entertainment system talking to the 5G uplink, or the brake light sensor sending information to the car's command center, whatever. It's contained in that area. And the FCC basically said, if it doesn't require high bandwidth, use Bluetooth, because Bluetooth is a proven technology that works and is constantly improving. But if you need burst traffic, use the low power, basically 6 gigahertz spectrum, of course, contingent upon you having to have the intelligence. And that's where I think we're going to run into some problems, is Wi-Fi devices can rely on the client OS to do the AFC stuff, right? Like if you're an access point, you're big enough, you have enough intelligence that you can do the AFC coordination. Plus, you probably have some kind of a central controller unit. But in a car, or in an insulin pump, maybe if the insulin pump checks into like a dashboard, I mean, most of them do because they send telemetry. But like, is it going to have to do that for the whole hospital, or is the whole hospital basically going to have to mark off a range of about 450 megahertz of operational channel space and say, you guys have to play nice in here, and everybody else out there needs to play nice for us? It's one of those things that as these devices are more implemented more widely around the world, we'll probably find like that comfortable medium. But I'm just glad that we have this additional slice of spectrum available to them, because let's be fair, if you know how to weave in and out of traffic with those old grandmas, you'll be perfectly fine. We're going to go back to another story about IBM, but this time it involves the pending acquisition of HashiCorp, because the UK Competition and Markets Authority, also known as the CMA, announced on December 30th, right at the end of the year, that they're going to be taking a closer look at the IBM HashiCorp acquisition. Now, of course, it's a government organization, so things don't go so quickly. The companies have been invited to make comments about this proposed analysis. They have until January 16th to put their comments in. And then the deadline for the ruling on the clearance is February 25th, all the way at the end of the month. And it has also been announced that the US FTC decided to take a closer look at this back in, I believe, October, November. But of course, we in the US are very soon to have a change in government. And that also means a change in the FTC. And that could mean a change in the way that this acquisition is being looked at over there. But what do you think about the UK CMA saying, wait a minute, IBM, let's think this through before we decide to go give our approval on it?
Yeah, I think that's the story here, Tom. It's not that there's something wrong with the IBM acquisition of HashiCorp. In fact, I've got to admit, I have become much more bullish on the whole concept over time, uh, especially after attending KubeCon, spending some time with IBM Red Hat folks, spending some time with HashiCorp folks, spending some time with end users and IT decision makers who are trying to figure out how to make sense of this acquisition. Frankly, everyone I've spoken to has been pretty optimistic about the outcome of an IBM owned HashiCorp. So let's get that right out of the way. I'm pretty confident, pretty happy with the direction this thing is going. But it seems like the CMA and the FTC may not be. So, as you mentioned, the fact that they have announced that they're going to open an investigation is, I mean, it's not a terrible sign, but it's not a great sign because what it means is that HashiCorp and IBM are going to have to pump the brakes on the acquisition, which means that they're going to have to pump the brakes on customers' decisions about using the products and investing further in the HashiCorp world. Probably going to slow down the acquisition. It's probably going to cause some at least road speed bumps. And I wouldn't be surprised if the CMA uh, decides that IBM has to do something in order to level the playing field after they own HashiCorp. Now, what something would that be? I don't even want to speculate. It could be almost anything. Generally, it involves divesting of some other asset or divesting immediately of some of the assets of the acquired company. So theoretically, we could see IBM only acquiring some of HashiCorp's portfolio and spinning out the rest to some competitor. We could also see nothing come of this. That's the other aspect. It could be that the CMA ultimately decides not to block it. And as you said as well, one of the reasons for that is that the US FTC, which has been extremely aggressive in the Biden administration, is likely to be somewhat different under the next administration. We suspect that the FTC commissioner will be replaced post haste, though, as we've said before on the rundown, there's a chance that they may not actually change the FTC commissioner since Lena Khan and JD Vance have actually seen eye to eye on a lot of things. So, but if they do replace the FTC commissioner, I would not be at all surprised if the new commissioner looks at this and says, "Yeah, I don't care about cloud orchestration and management tools and IBM. I'm looking for different stories here," and doesn't step in. And frankly, if the U.S. isn't going to do anything to block it, I'm not sure if that would make Europe more or less likely to block it. So we'll see what happens. I'm not too worried about it. I don't think anybody should be. I don't think any customers should be worried at all because the worst case scenario is part of the Hashi portfolio gets spun out or the deal gets blocked or something. It's not a big deal. They'll find another buyer. It's a valuable suite of tools. So, is this kind of nothing? I'd say it's not nothing, but it probably isn't something. Tech distributor Ingram Micro announced back on December 16th that they're going to dissolve their partnership with VMware by Broadcom. This decision comes as the companies failed to negotiate a new agreement on Ingram Micro reselling VMware's software. Ingram Micro serves over 1,500 vendors and over 160,000 customers. It's one of the biggest resellers out there. And those customers have reported that Ingram was slow to respond to changes in the program since the acquisition. Some of the business that Ingram Micro will be giving up here will go to other distributors. Some of it will be taken in house by VMware. Tom, what do you make of this? One of the biggest distributors in the world stopping distributing VMware.
This is one of those stories where on the surface it looks like, oh yeah, VMware by Broadcom screwed up, and then you get into the nuts and bolts of it and you realize there's a little bit more going on. So for those of you who don't know, who have never worked in the reseller world, unless you're a really really big partner, you don't usually buy directly from the company. You buy through a third party, whether it's Ingram Micro or Cynix or Tech Data. Basically, think of them like the Costco of IT stuff. You go buy wholesale from them and you mark it up a little bit and you sell it to your customers. In fact, some companies at a certain partnership level, you have to buy through a distribution partner, because then like Cisco can just ship that distribution partner like 85 pallets of switches and they don't have to worry about shipping them directly to you. That partnership requires that distributor to do a lot of extra heavy lifting, right? So like they have experts on staff whose job it is to figure out like how many licenses you need and which partner SKUs go together, and there's a lot that goes into it. Well, first thing that happened was when VMware by Broadcom announced last year that they were going to cut out the top 2,000 customers and take them private. That impacted a lot of business. And that impacted a lot of business for companies like Ingram Micro and Cynix and Tech Data, who were sellers for those top tiers. Because think about it like this: if you're a company that has the in-house expertise to do this yourself and you just want the software, and if Broadcom doesn't want to sell it to you, you can literally go buy that from Ingram Micro. I've had customers who've done that to me in the past. They're like, well, we ordered this firewall directly. Can you come install it for me? I'm like, okay, sure, no problem. The problem there is that when you do a massive change to the way that you do business, the people that were trained on the way that you do business have to get retrained on that. And there's always a lag time there, right? Especially if this is not something that you have prepared for, like you knew it was coming, you knew these things were going to happen. And a lot of the customers, the partners of Ingram Micro, were saying that they were very slow to respond, that they were getting part numbers wrong, allegedly, and that they were just not getting back to them with quotes. And then when VMware by Broadcom kind of did an about face on the whole partnership thing, it made people wonder, well, if I can buy directly from them and I don't have to worry about this, or I can go back to my preferred partner, whether it's someone like a Worldwide Technologies or a Presidio or whomever, why would I go through a middleman like Ingram Micro that's not doing a good job? So there's, as much as everybody wants to beat up on VMware by Broadcom and some of the moves they've made, I think this really is a company getting caught out, not being in a good position, and saying it's going to cost me too much money. And there's the specter of, well, what happens when the company decides to take their partners in private again, their customers private? So yeah, I never want to see a situation like this where two companies, end up dissolving a partnership. Of course, I'm sure within another couple of years, there'll be a renegotiation and they'll be back on the good list again. But of course, if it's a company like Ingram Micro, who, like you said, is one of the largest distributors in the world, I think they're probably going to be okay. They'll pick up the business somewhere else while they retool and get ready to work in a new world of VMware by Broadcom. All right, Stephen, it's the beginning of 2025. And historically, there has been one event that has dominated January more than any other one, and that is the Consumer Electronics Show. But don't let the C part of that fool you. There is a lot of technology that's announced at CES that is not necessarily consumer focused, that has impacts on the entire industry. There's two stories that we really wanted to dive into that kind of plot a trajectory for the way that 2025 is going to go. The first one, NVIDIA. That's it. That's the whole story. No, I'm kidding. CEO Jensen Huang, who, by the way, was lucky enough to get a selfie with Pat Moorhead of 6.5 Live. He was the keynote speaker for CES 2025, and I know you can guess he talked about it's bringing AI into the real world. They also talked about their new Cosmos World Foundational Model. NVIDIA aims to enable AI systems to understand and interact with the physical world. The Cosmos model, which has been trained on 20 million hours of video data, will be freely distributed through Hugging Face and the NVIDIA GPU cloud. Wang also recommends that organizations adopt a three computer AI system, which naturally is all powered by NVIDIA, and suggests a future where AI and robotics will disrupt traditional economics and labor, which I'm sure was very well received by that audience. This also includes Project Digits, which is a desktop system for AI application development, and the Llama Nemotron family of open models for building agentic AI applications. Stephen, I'm pretty sure I just hit my AI buzzword bingo card for 2025 and 2026, but help us make a little bit of sense of what everybody's favorite rockstar AI god talked about during the CES keynote.
Well, first of all, those of us who are watching the keynote were absolutely blinded by Jensen's incredible, shiny alligator skin leather jacket. He's gotten a jacket upgrade to go with the AI chip upgrades as well. But looking beyond that, let's talk a little bit about what he's talking about here. First off, kudos to NVIDIA and Jensen Huang in particular. This keynote was as visionary as anything you'd see from any tech company today. And that's good and also a little bad because, as you mentioned, the content of the keynote was very much, hey, guess what? Pathetic humans, you're no longer needed here. Well, at least that's how some people were taking the keynote, because truly what he was talking about is the power of the next generation of AI systems is pretty mind blowing. So think about it this way. So far, we've had large language models that have been able to convincingly produce text that seems like there's thought behind it. Now, the jury's still out on whether there is or is not thought behind it and whether these systems are actually exhibiting emergent behavior or simply convincing us that they are. Uh, But it doesn't really matter if it's good enough. Essentially, if you're able to create a simulation of reality that's good enough to fool everyone, then it might as well be reality. And that's sort of what NVIDIA is looking at doing next. What if instead of just taking text and inputting and outputting text, what if an AI system was trained on essentially physics and the real world around us? And that's what NVIDIA is trying to do here with the Cosmos model. Essentially, just like they did or others did with LLMs, they're trying to do that with the real world. So the idea would be that you could train a system to understand things like gravity and object permanence and physical dimensions and things like that. And that would solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing right now in a lot of the AI generated content out there. So, for example, if you've played around much with some of the AI video synthesis systems, they're really good, but also really bad because they actually have no real understanding of the real world. They're just pretending to. So, sort of like earlier versions of ChatGPT would sometimes just completely go off the rails with their responses. These video synthesis systems also just completely go off the rail. And for example, you'll see a synthetic video of a car driving that way, and then suddenly the front and the rear end morph backwards, and it's suddenly going backwards and the other way, or something like that. That shows that it just has no concept of reality. The same thing is true of basically any kind of AI generated video at this point. And what that says is it says that the model simply has no understanding of the real world, or at least no way to convince us that it understands the real world. It's just making fake pictures. What NVIDIA is trying to do is enable a future where AI models would have the ability to build basically a fake version of the world, and then build video or interactions or robotic systems based on that, based on the constraints of that virtual world, and apply those to the real world. So that's all well and good when you're talking to some of the demos that they showed, for example, of convincing photos or videos that don't have six fingers on their hand, or different sized things, giant bunnies, or whatever. All of this is much more constrained to the real world and much more convincing. But then what they're talking about, and this is what makes it visionary, is apply that to the real world. So you have this digital twin of the world where AI can learn and explore, and then you can apply that to things like robots and autonomous vehicles and so on. And in fact, this is how many previous self-driving systems have operated: is they build a digital twin of the world, and then they apply rules in that digital world and then bring them into the real world, so that cars don't make stupid mistakes like these video generators would. Uh, so that's sort of what NVIDIA is looking at doing here. It's a very cool, it's very visionary, and it's very not something NVIDIA is going to do alone. Now, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to sell a huge amount of processors. NVIDIA is already the most valuable company in the AI space by far. NVIDIA says that the acceptance of their next generation processors has just been absolutely off the charts. Another thing we're not going to talk about, because this is enterprise tech, not consumer tech, is NVIDIA showed their future consumer graphics cards and GPUs. Absolutely cool stuff. Check out your favorite consumer tech space for reporting on that. Um, so NVIDIA is basically saying companies need three computers or three new systems. They need a DGX system or a similar system from an OEM, which is what's used to train AI models. And these things are big and expensive and power hungry. This is that AI supercomputer that we've been talking about. Of course, they're a lot less power hungry, but a lot more expensive in this next generation world. Now, NVIDIA amused us by showing a wafer scale chip, which is not something that they're actually going to create. I think Cerebrus would have a thing or two to say about that. Instead, what NVIDIA is delivering is their NVL 72, which is their big honkin' interconnected rack scale AI supercomputer. They also talked about a second needed requirement, which would be a training system, which would allow companies to build this omniverse physical world, and explore that. And then the third thing they would need is to have factory, warehouse, cars, robots, etc., also using NVIDIA processors out there. So between the three of these things, essentially, NVIDIA has a much bigger total addressable market. They've got much, much more that they can offer. And I think they're hoping that that's what they're actually going to do. But, uh, what did they actually announce at CES? Well, what they announced was basically an AI PC that's built on the Grace Blackwell ARM slash GPU chip that they've already been shipping. Uh, that thing is going to be a pretty nice desktop system. I can't wait till Jeff Geerling gets his hands on one to run some benchmarks on it. The other thing they've talked about is massively expanding the availability of models. So they've taken the Llama models and basically enhanced those, put them up on Hugging Face. They've got models from other companies as well, all in the effort of basically giving the software that's going to be needed to run on these AI PCs or AI workstations, in order to enable the people, like us, to develop the next generation of AI applications. This is a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to digest. There were a lot of other things that obviously announced at CES, including new laptop chips from Intel and AMD, including a lot of really cool GPU technology from AMD and from NVIDIA. Tom, talk to us a little bit about some of your other takeaways from CES.
It sounds to me like NVIDIA is gearing up to make a mountain of money. And I can't blame them for saying that, right? Like they have sold a ridiculous amount of hardware to people who are essentially using the infiniteness of technology to build slightly better autocorrect. I mean, that's kind of what you're looking at with the GPT model. And Jensen kind of said that to that effect. Like everything so far has been focused on GPT, and that's not how the real world works. Like you've mentioned, it's the interaction with things. It's, building a digital twin of a warehouse so that the robots know where to go pluck things off the shelves. Every time you talk about what that's going to take, just add more processing power and more processing power. We joked around a lot in 2024 about how the thing that may save the U.S. nuclear industry is AI. I'm at the point now where I'm thinking that AI may be the thing that creates cold fusion because it's about the only thing that's going to supply enough power to these models when you think about it. And the fact that NVIDIA is now saying, well, no, you don't just need Blackwell in the cloud to run all of these wonderful things. You need things at your desk that can do that for you. And you need these development kits and you need to buy more hardware from us. And that's really the key that they're trying to get to is they've realized that you can't build a big enough system. I mean, for goodness sakes, their current half rack unit requires water cooling. It's the only way that it's not going to turn your data center into a sauna, and even then it might actually do it. So I think that NVIDIA is seeing the same thing that Intel saw years ago, right? Like we are seeing a maximum for what we can do with the performance of a unit. What we've got to do now is we've got to back that performance off and split it across multiple units. In Intel's case, they came up with the core concept, right? Multi-cores on a die. NVIDIA is now saying, well, what if I took that concept of decomposing what we do in a giant Blackwell cluster into systems that can sit on somebody's desk? Now, remember that there is a wide gulf between what you're going to be doing with, I don't know, stable diffusion or pick your favorite AI generator of video or images or whatever, and like what a warehouse scale thing would be doing or what, digital twinning the world would be doing. And I think that NVIDIA needs to do a better job of drawing that distinction between the two. Because remember, we're not quite 2 years into this AI revolution. And so far, the massive use of AI to write term papers and create insights into my life hasn't actually done a lot for the end user. They've been sold on this promise of what AI can do, mostly by companies like NVIDIA who are trying to sell as much AI hardware as possible. And it's paid off handsomely for them. I saw a quote just this last week that 50% of the people that work for NVIDIA are now worth at least $25 million because of the stock price. So they've done well for themselves. But how can they continue to grow? Because eventually you're going to hit a limit, right? And I think that's what Jensen's trying to say is in order for us to continue to grow, we have to sell more systems to more people to do more stuff with AI as we upscale what AI is capable of doing. And I think that that is one of the key messages that you have to take away from this. It's time to break away from writing term papers. It's time to, and essentially the most truthful way to say the old idiom of where the rubber meets the road, it's time for the AI model to meet the road and figure out how to make this stuff work with things that we can touch and use every day. Well, Stephen, here's the other big story that's coming out of CES. And I got some news for you. Dude, you're not getting an XPS or an Inspiron or a Latitude. You're getting a Dell, just a Dell. Because at CES, Dell announced a complete rebranding of their entire workstation lineup. Gone are the familiar brands that we've had over the years, and in their place is something that might seem eerily familiar. Their lineup will now go by three major monikers: Dell, Dell Pro, and Dell Pro Max. There will also be some additional branding such as Plus and Premium, but that's neither here nor there. Dell has taken some flack in the press for copying one of their competitors' naming conventions, but there's also discussion about how people who are, coming to a replacement cycle in their PC buying are going to look to add AI features, and how this new branding naming convention will tie into that. So, Stephen, I know that this kind of focuses a little bit on the consumer side of the brand, but as we know, Dell sells more than just laptops. They sell optiplexes. They sell, enterprise grade workstations, and they've said that the Pro and Pro Max branding is for those workstations. So, what's Dell thinking here?
Well, I'm not going to guess what they're thinking, but I think that if I was a company like Dell and I was seeing the positives of companies like Apple who have much simpler product lines, maybe I would be thinking, hey, we need to simplify the nomenclature around our product lines too. The old brands that you mentioned, brands like Inspiron, Precision, and XPS, these are all historic brands that have supporters and man, I miss Latitude, in the world. But at the same time, it makes the product line a little confusing sometimes because you look at it and you're like, is this Precision laptop the right one for me, or should I go with the XPS? And what about this AI PC thing? So I like the idea that Dell had, which is let's simplify our branding. Let's have predictable naming across the brands. And what they've done, I think that we should, mention is that essentially there's three brands. There's going to be Dell, there's going to be Dell Pro, and then there's going to be Dell Pro Max, which I wish was just Dell Max. But anyway, actually, maybe Dell Max would be an infringement on Apple's intellectual property. Anyway, but point is, uh, they have three lines, and so if you're a pro, then you're going to get a Dell Pro. If you're just a normal human, then you're going to get a Dell, right, dude? You're getting a Dell. I had to say it. But then within that, there's also flavors, and so there's the regular one, there's the plus, and then there's the premium. Now, people are having a field day with this and saying, oh, I'm going to get the Dell Premium Plus Pro Max Plus Pro Premium Plus. No, that's not what Dell's saying here. What they're saying is you're a pro, so you're going to get a pro laptop or workstation, and you want the better one, but not the best one, so you're going to get the plus. So it's Dell Pro Plus. That's not confusing. In fact, that's the opposite of confusing to me. That's simple, and I like it. Um, I don't love when you start getting to the questions of, well, is a Pro Max Premium the same as a Pro Premium? Well, no. What about a Dell Premium compared to a Dell Pro base model? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe these weren't the right words, but it was time for Dell to simplify their whole world, especially with XPS becoming a bigger brand. I should also mention Alienware is not included in this. So if you want a completely bizarre gaming workstation from Dell, you got it, baby.
I'm on the fence here, right? It's like when Wendy's changed their slogan from "What's the beef" to or "Where's the beef" to some other thing, right? Like, this is a thing that's worked for you for years, right? Right. That's how long ago they changed it. But like, I get it, right? There's when everything is an XPS, then it's boring. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I faced the same problem when I bought the laptop that I'm currently using. Is the best Pro model better than the entry level Pro Max model? And there's nuance to it, right? And that's me as someone who knows how computers work. For my grandmother, no, like they're going to buy the one that fits their budget that says the magic words on it, right? It it belies the fact that consumers don't make decisions based on spec sheets anymore. Think about Wi-Fi, because we just published a great episode on the Tech Field Day podcast about Wi-Fi marketing numbers, and the fact that the biggest Wi-Fi marketing number is one that we've already referenced in this episode: Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7. Nobody cares about the specs anymore. They care about the number, and the higher the number, the better. So what Dell is basically saying is that if you are a home user, you get the Dell. If you are a corporate user, you get the Dell Pro. And if you were a developer, you get the Dell Pro Max, right? Cut and dried, simple, easy. But where's the AI? Because we all know that it's going to have to be the Dell Pro Plus plus AI, or the Dell Pro Premium plus AI. And maybe that's the premium, is it all includes the AI NPUs or what have you, because that's what people are buying. They are buying the buzzword feature sets. And Dell needs to get a handle on this. Daniel Newman, head of the Futurum Group, and one of those AI prognosticators, has said for a very long time that there is a super cycle emerging where people are going to go out and buy new hardware for these new features. And it didn't hit in 2024. It may hit in 2025 when AI is more proven out and people have a need for doing it. And Microsoft's doing wonderful things with this, with their Copilot PC initiative, right? But it's up to those manufacturers. Microsoft historically has not been able to sell PCs because they sell the software, not the hardware. They're getting more in tune with that with the Surface and all these other things, and saying, well, if it needs to be a Copilot Plus PC, it needs to have all of these additions to make it run. They're doing a lot of reliance on Dell in order to offer those things to the market. Dell really has to embrace this, because I don't know about you, but I don't see a need to go out and buy a new system right now. Like, mine is running fast enough. Mine is doing its job still. Am I sold on the new hardware yet? Not necessarily. I mean, I know that people like Jensen would love if I was sold on the new hardware, but I'm not. So there's got to be a compelling reason to do it. And most of the time, that compelling reason is, oh, this new software won't run on it. That's one of the reasons why gaming systems have such a high turnover, right? Is because I'm constantly having to put new hardware in there, like graphics cards, to be able to support new games. Workstations don't do that. I can remember one of my first IT jobs was deploying old workstations because they still worked. And you're not going to see a change in that until there's some compelling reason to upgrade. So Dell is basically clearing the deck and saying, from here on out, we're going to give you a compelling reason to upgrade. Because is the XPS 1171 any better than the XPS 1371? I don't know. But is the Dell Pro Max Premium better than the XPS 1171? Well, the name alone suggests that it will be. So maybe it's time for me to upgrade. Um, I hope this pays off for them. But if I can just say, next time, do the market research about the names and change them a little. Maybe don't make them a copy of a certain mobile device lineup from a company that you compete against in other markets, because that's the thing that people really didn't like.
One more thing I'd like to add here too is I'm really hoping that this new naming will give Dell the latitude, if you'll forgive the pun, to produce really nice machines. I mean, one of the nice things about the XPS line is that it was a really high quality machine. And we've seen a race to the bottom in the PC market. That's why I switched to the Mac years ago, was because I just got tired of these flimsy plastic PCs. And Apple was doing, really solid engineering with aluminum and everything. Dell did that with the XPS line. Dell did that with the Precision line. I'm hoping that this will give them the opening to continue to do that, because people should be buying really good, solid machines instead of just buying, low end plasticky machines off the rack at a local big box store. Maybe having clearly differentiated product lines with clearly differentiated names like this, especially, I mean, I'm sorry, but Pro and Pro Max, that's a line in the sand. Premium is a line in the sand. Premium says you're getting a better machine than you would normally. I'm hoping that Dell embraces that and uses this as an opportunity to really continue to produce premium machines and offer those at differentiating levels of pricing, and really bring the PC into that market space that Apple has long dominated. Because frankly, Apple's switch to their ARM processors has opened the door to people embracing higher quality and higher cost PCs.
And we know that this story is going to develop over the course of 2025, because this is the wave of things. And the best place to check out what we're doing, of course, is the rundown. But there are other places that we appear on a regular basis where we talk about the trajectory of technology and how it interacts with users. And that is, of course, the world famous Tech Field Day event series. And the first one is coming up at the end of this month. Stephen, what have you got in store for us?
Well, we got AI Field Day. If you can't get enough AI, tune in at the end of the month for AI Field Day, last week of the month. We're going to be out in California. We're going to be learning about what's going on in AI from the enterprise perspective. And I hope to make some announcements soon about the content of the presentations and so on. It's looking great. We got some other ones too. We've got our friend Alistair is going to be leading Cloud Field Day in February. And Tom, I think you got some stuff in February as well.
You're right, I do. I've already booked my ticket to Amsterdam. I am going to go put on some wooden clogs and dance my way onto the Cisco Live stage to hear about all of the latest announcements that they have in store for us. We are nailing down the schedule right now. I can't talk about it just yet, but I promise you there's going to be some cool stuff on the horizon. Remember that we are going to be in European time. So, for all of our European listeners out there, this is your opportunity to watch Tech Field Day live as it's happening. For those of you who are sleepyheads who think, I got to get my 8 hours of rest, don't worry. We're going to have the videos published on YouTube as soon as we can. But of course, you can always check the live replay on our Tech Field Day LinkedIn page. And I'm going to be back in March for Networking Field Day. That's my first full US outing of the year. Stay tuned for more details on that because we got some exciting things coming your way. Just like we have exciting episodes of the Gestalt IT Rundown coming your way every Wednesday. Don't forget that we upload this to our website at gestaltit.com with show notes. We upload it to our YouTube channel, and we also update it in your favorite podcast application. If you would rather listen to us at 1.25x speed while you're going on your January walk, go for it. We also have episodes streamed on TechStrong TV, and we appear on a lot of other TechStrong and Future and Group properties. We're frequent guests on a lot of other podcasts. We will be back next Wednesday to check out all of the news from everybody who's now getting back to work and all the fun stuff that's happening. We will be joining you with great co-hosts throughout the year and lots of exciting news. So make sure that you set your calendar for Wednesday afternoons to check out what we're doing here at the Rundown. So for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, and for Stephen Foskett, thanks for tuning in. We're happy to see you again after the holidays. Stay tuned because more great things are coming your way. Have a good one.